Good day, Mr. Briggs. Please select an agent for your next mission. Scanning Imperial Agent Database. Qualified agent found. Agent ID, Neil Thorpe. Agent cover story, President, 2D Storyteller. Details as follows.
Greetings, travelers, and welcome to Traveler Mayday 2022, sponsored by Cyborg Prime Games. You can find me at cyborgprime.com or by searching for my name in the Facebook search tool, or find a link in the video description below. Thank you for joining us for the 4th annual Mayday Traveler Day event. It's a day we celebrate Traveler in all its editions and offshoots for all the fun times it's given us around the gaming table with friends and family. I'm your host, Frank Succardi, also known as Cyborg Prime, and today I'm happy to introduce my friend, Neil Thorpe of 2D Storyteller. Welcome, Neil.
Hello there, Mr. Prime.
How are you
Neil
today?
Thorpe, 2D I'm all right. I just figured out who I am then, Cyborg.
I'm supposed
I said
to...
it like I deserve points for it.
Hello, I'm here to interview Neil Thorpe of 2D Storyteller.
What he said? Yeah.
Would you please put him on the line?
Storyteller. Right. Hi, Cyborg. Thanks for having me on again, dude. I'm Neil Thorpe from 2D Storyteller. We create animated and interactive battle maps for role-play games.
Fantastic. This is the third time you've been on our podcast for the Mayday event, so thanks for your continued support.
Anytime, man. Third time's a charm.
Fantastic. I hope you come back next year.
Yes, with any luck.
Excellent. So, Neil, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Expand on your brief introduction a moment ago. Who are you and what do you do?
I create online products for role-play games, mainly animated and interactive battle map role-play games. I also do tokens and such. I started out role-playing in 95, was it? When I started doing live-action fantasy role-playing. Went on to play Traveller, Shadowrun, D&D, the whole gamut of RPGs and all their loveliness. And these days, I mainly spend my time creating things for GMs to help basically make their games more alive and wonderful, vibrant and fluffy. Well, the fluffy bit's not accurate. Everything else is.
Maybe not so soft and fluffy, but yes.
No, not so soft and fluffy, especially my latest work. Very evil and cruel. But that's what GMs like. You want to be cruel and evil to your players to some degree.
That's true. So
maybe not sadistic.
Right. So
you got to punish them.
Right. So tell me, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Where do you live now?
Well, I'm from the UK, born and raised in Yorkshire, and I was from West Yorkshire, which means nothing to anyone outside West Yorkshire. Now, these days, I'm in South Yorkshire, which means nothing, once again, to anyone outside of Yorkshire. North of England, basically.
I hear they make good pudding there.
Yorkshire pudding, you mean, lad?
Yes.
Oh, aye.
I was
very good
disappointed
Yorkshire
to find
pudding.
out it's not really pudding, is it?
It's not pudding at all. You have it with your main meal. I don't know how to describe it. Imagine a pancake that's in like a ball of dough pancake with a hole in the middle that's great with gravy. I don't know how else to describe it. It's like just, that's the best description I've got. A Yorkshire pudding is
it's
a
like
thin ball of dough with a hole in the middle.
Dinner roll with a hole in the middle for butter and gravy, right?
I've got it. Yorkshire pudding. A Yorkshire pudding is like a bowl made of pancake mix. A pancake mix bowl. Imagine that. You to pour some lovely gravy and say, look, you're making my mouth water thinking about this. So yeah, Google it. I'm sure you can find Yorkshire puddings.
Awesome. So do you have any hobbies aside from gaming that you do in Yorkshire?
Well, gaming is my ultimate hobby, and it's, as anyone who does it will know, it's such a vast hobby that it doesn't leave much room for other hobbies, to be honest. I do like online gaming. I'm pretty much a Dread Hunger addict at the moment, which I know I managed to rope you into a few times.
Yes, I've tasted human flesh and I liked it.
So yeah, online gaming. I like a bit of wargaming. I've really got into Walking Dead, Star Wars Legion, a bit of Kill Team. So if I'm not role playing, I'm wargaming. So I'm thoroughly in the depths of the geek forest.
What is it about Dread Hunger, for instance, that really draws you to it? I see that you've been playing a lot of that lately.
Well, I'm very, you know what? Dreadhunger it's got the unique game mechanic of trying to find the traitor. I know that Among Us did that as well, but I like it because it's a game mechanic that's a bit ethereal. You know what I mean? It's not something they built into the engine. It's social. You've actually got to, you could get along in Dreadhunger and be really good at it just by knowing how to lie really well, which I don't, but I like I like the feel of playing that kind of game. It's tense. It's kind of like The Thing.
Yeah. Good point. You never know who's the traitor, and you never know
Exactly.
when they're going to spring.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about it. It creates a certain dramatic tension which isn't written into any code or anything, which I like.
I've seen people help out the crew, and then they were actually ultimately the traitors.
That's it. That's a big brain move on part of the traitor, especially if you help out the crew and then poison the stew.
Mm-hmm.
That's a classic. I love watching people throw up everywhere. Hard to pull off, but it's funny to watch.
Yeah, it's a hilarious game. I mean, they executed it well.
Yeah, it's good.
Do you have any favorite sci-fi book or movie or?
Well, I just finished rereading Dune for the third or fourth time since the new movie came out.
Oh yeah, how do you like it?
Oh, Dune, man, it's classic. It's where so much sci-fi began, and it's actually really weird in its own sense because unlike a lot of sci-fi, it doesn't spend a lot of its time talking about big technology or anything like that. It's very much a very personal book. I remember, you see, in my memory, Dune was this big sci-fi epic book, but when I reread it, once this new film came out, I remembered, no, it is a very personal book. It's about power structures and how we slot into them. It's fascinating. And obviously the classics like Aliens. I mentioned this before on a previous podcast, but Black Hole. Ever since we mentioned it on the podcast, I keep going back and watching bits of it. And on the whole, it is just another cheesy Disney movie. But it's like I've been watching people take it apart on a visual level. And the more, you know what, maybe it's just people over intellectualizing it, but that last shot where the villain is inside the robot on this planet, and someone compared it to Dante's Inferno with all the lost souls, and like he's in hell even though he's in the black hole. And when I look at it from that, it made me rewatch the whole thing all over again. So yeah, Black Hole. I'm a big fan of that again recently.
Yeah, looking at it, but maybe with an eye for similarities towards Event Horizon.
Yeah. Like a very early Disney Event Horizon, right. Which I don't know how you jam them together.
Event Horizon for children.
Hellraiser for Disney. We'll tear your soul apart.
It's okay, the children are orphans. That's how most Disney shows are, right? I mean, the kids are orphans.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
I lost my parents tragically, and now I must rise to some form of challenge and learn an important lesson.
Yes. I was like the Escape from Witch Mountain Disney franchise back in the day. The alien children that could had telekinetic powers.
I don't actually remember that one.
Yes, they're being pursued by the government or the police or whatever, and they're trying to get to a place and leave on their spaceship. Check it out. Classic.
I'll check that out. Oh, and Interstellar, of course. How can I forget that recent nugget? You see, now Interstellar's a weird one. First time I watched it, I don't know, man. It didn't click for me. But the second time I watched it, I was absolutely engrossed. Maybe I was resistant to the Matthew McConaughey syndrome. You want to look at my pics?
Yeah, it'd be cooler if you did.
Maybe I left my shirt up just a little for you.
I like the robot. That was very cool.
Yeah.
I also like
because it sounded real, didn't it?
Yeah, and it was also kind of cool the time difference between the ship that was in orbit and the guys on the planet.
Yeah, it really brought to life this idea that alien worlds, they aren't just weird. It's not just a strange set like we're used to seeing on a sci-fi TV series.
Right.
It could actually, reality could be very different just depending on where we are in the universe. And that was concept really blew my mind.
Yeah. They're like, oh, this is a habitable planet. Oh, wait, no, there's tidal waves every 20 minutes or something,
That's not a mountain. Yeah.
Right. yeah. That was actually pretty cool. I enjoyed that. So,
I could go on about films for ages, so it's probably best to keep moving forward.
What about those? Do you see a common thread between all of those intellectual properties, if you will, the aliens,
sci-fi in general? The thing that attracts me to it is it's a way. All fiction's a way to reflect, isn't it? It's a way to reflect on the world that we actually live in by being in this nice, safe, fictional environment that we don't live in. And sci-fi is a way to really throw your mind out there and say, okay, I've got this strange idea that I want to explore. I'm going to put it into a sci-fi setting and really create just a bizarre world. But this one theme in the world is going to like reflect back at you by the end of the story and make you look at your own world. I mean, like Blade Runner, for example. You know, it starts off and it feels like just a normal film noir where, or maybe it's going to turn into an action film. But by the end of it, it's this deep philosophical like exploration of what it means to be alive and what it means to know that someday you're going to die and what do you do with that short time you've got. And that took me totally by surprise. I'm in the rather unpopular position of loving the theatrical version with the voiceover narration because I saw it on VHS first like that. But yeah, that really blew me away. And that's what I love about sci-fi, the way it can take us to these fantastic worlds, but by the end of it, there's something about it which makes us look at our world a bit differently. That's where I think sci-fi is at its best.
The thing I liked about Blade Runner was what's the difference between something that's alive and something that thinks it's alive?
Yeah. And the idea of if you have a memory, but it's not real, are you sure it's not real? Because it's still there and it's still influencing your personality. So surely that memory is still as real.
It's real
as
to you.
One that's not implanted. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I love that. All those kinds
it is a brilliant, but it's very subtle. You know, it's not one of those films where it's not a popcorn flick. It's presented almost like one, like it's going to be a big sci-fi action film, but actually it's kind of deep philosophical themes in there, and I love that. I love that about sci-fi.
Yeah. So, tell us about how you got into gaming. What was the first role-playing game that you got into, and how did that go?
Well, the first one was D&D, and like any new player, you make a bit of a numpty of yourself first time because you're feeling it out, and all you've got to go off is all those big heroic things. So you leap gloriously into danger and die horribly. But yeah, D&D first edition, someone just ran an offshoot game, and that got me hooked onto it. And from there, I was getting into any game I could do. Played a bit of Shadowrun, a bit of Cyberpunk. I have to say I prefer Shadowrun to Cyberpunk just because of the wackiness.
There's been a common theme of Cyberpunk and Shadowrun specifically through the guest interviews. There's a lot of crossover.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, they are the same setting in many ways, aren't they? It's just Shadowrun crowbars in all the fantasy elements of magic and orcs and elves and all that lot.
That's true. I wasn't sure I was going to like it because of that. I kind of wanted a more tech game, but no, I loved it. I ended up GMing it for over a year.
Yeah, I mean, well, the good thing about Shadowrun is it's got that wackiness about it, but actually they go into so much effort into fleshing out the world and putting a good foundation for why things are the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually get as serious as you want to get with Shadowrun, and like with it, once again, it does the job. Like with any good sci-fi, there's bits in there that make you reflect on the world that you actually live in. It's good.
How did you transition from D&D and Shadowrun into Traveller? What was your first exposure to Traveller?
Well, traveler games are they're not as easy to come by. And it was just that I was turning up to a regular roleplay group, and there was always this guy in the corner, and he always had this stack of books. He had these beautiful pictures of spaceships on them. So, the sci-fi part of it's like, what is that? But whenever I was asking one of the players, what is Traveller? What's it about? They couldn't give me a kind of clear answer. I'm like, well, what do you play, Traveller? Oh, you're humans. I'm like, yeah, but what do you do? Well, you're in the future. I'm like, they gave me a clear. I was like, well, yeah, but what's the game about? Yeah, can you pin this down for me, please? But then I got one of the Traveller books secondhand from my local gaming shop. And the more I read it, the more I thought, it's back to this idea that they were just trying to reflect like an honest depiction of a possible future world. And they just ran with that idea and tried to logically flesh it out as realistically as possible. And then as much as possible, they're leaving it to you, the GM, to really start weaving that into a story. Where can characters fit into it? And that's what kind of seduced me, because all the different sci-fi ideas I'd had, all of a sudden, this system could, it's laid the groundwork for me. It's like before the Alien RPG came out, any Alien RPG game I wanted to run, I was using Traveller just because it had pretty much everything I needed already laid down.
Yeah, a lot of people use it as a framework. If you want to add aliens, you just modify the base stats or whatever
Oh.
to reflect, racial, I guess, modifications.
Yeah,
Or
and it
generalizing,
really it works well for that. I mean, the first game I joined in, I managed to sneak into it. We were playing Pirates, and obviously I wasn't the best player early on, but he was very patient with me as a new player, and because of the setting, it wasn't like I had a massive arsenal of which to go crazy with and be an annoying player. So that, in fact, Traveller was like the first game where I learned to kind of sober up as a player and just get involved in a interesting character in interesting situations, and that to be, that's enough for a good RPG, and that's kind of the framework that's ever carried on ever since.
What exactly was it that kind of made Traveller your go-to? I mean, or what was there a specific thing that you'd like to do, like build worlds or create characters or things like that?
Well, you see, now I'm not a big rules guy. I like the narratives, the story, how things came to be, cause and effect, that kind of thing. So I like the idea of sector building. Not so much, how many light years and what are the trade routes like or anything like that, but how like planets grew up in relation to each other. I love the idea of creating a sector where the planets actually had some degree of interaction with each other, and the fact that they were close by neighbors influenced each other's development, the wars they had. Like Tolkien always used to say, languages build up from the people that have been invaded and the wars that have happened. I imagined it very much along those same lines. Each technological and cultural advancement, there was some great war behind it, or some great battle, or betrayal, or cultural intervention. I liked that part of it. Don't get me wrong, I can't say everything I ever created got used,
Right.
but it was great fun, just fleshing these things out, right in your own little systems and sectors and histories of these galactic areas.
Cool. Yes, that's something that appeals to a lot of folks, myself included.
Like I say, lots of hours of work that a lot of it didn't see the light of day, but God, I enjoyed the process, and it really does facilitate it well.
Do you have a favorite Traveller career?
I like Rogue just because it's easily pliable to so many different things, but also, most importantly, is I love a down-to-earth kind of character in a larger-than-life setting, if you know what I mean. I know it's stereotypical, but I loved Han Solo in the original Star Wars series, so that always kind of rubbed off on me. And I like to take it a little bit in my own direction, like pirate. I kind of got hooked on that idea, and if I wasn't a pirate, I was a criminal of some description. And obviously, that's where Rogue starts to come in and facilitate your needs, so to speak. So
Right.
I liked the idea of playing it and just a scumbag in a galaxy area.
In a galaxy full of scumbags.
Yeah, effectively. But also, the irony is in Traveller, the technology is so high, you don't really, the universe doesn't have to be a horrible place. You know what I mean? It could be amazing and, a bit Star Trek-y if it wanted to, but that's what I liked about it. Human nature's just not ready for that kind of thing. Still, even in that future, human nature's not quite ready to just settle its differences and be something better.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
I liked the honesty of that.
So this year's theme is agents. Can you think of any agents from Sci-Fi that you like?
Well, I'm going to be unfortunately stereotypical. I've thought of two really good examples. One of them is probably painfully obvious, which is Decker from Blade Runner. As agents go, for me, he's the ultimate example of an interesting agent character to play. He's completely at odds with the agency he works for. You can't stand him. And by the end of it, he identifies more with the people he's supposedly hunting than the people he's working for. So for me, he's like the ultimate example of an interesting agent to play. I'm sure it could be interesting to play an agent who totally believes in the cause and, zip, zip, zip up the lickety split. But I like contrast and I like conflict, especially when it comes to rigid organizations. So for me, if I was to play an agent, I'd want to play an agent that doesn't quite fit for some reason.
Somebody who's self-conflicted.
Yeah. Another good example, the other example of that, and this is sci-fi, although it's weird sci-fi. Have you ever seen the film Brazil?
Yes.
Sam Lowry, the main character, he's there dreaming of flying through the air with angel wings, but then he wakes up and he's just a part of this painfully constrictive bureaucracy in a sci-fi world where where nothing can be off the books anymore. Everything's got to be signed in triplicate, have a 27B stroke 6 filled out. Everything's a bureaucratic form, and he just can't escape it. But his dreams are always so amazing, but his real life is just down in this technological nightmare. Once again, it's that same theme, someone who's at odds with the institute that they're woven up inside of. No, sorry, that's just the kind of characters I like to play, if in that kind of circumstances. But that applies to if I'm like playing a rogue. I don't want to be an evil rogue. I don't want to, I might be the Robin Hood type, or the one that does something good despite it being not that profitable. So yeah, I like the rebellious characters.
So in D&D terms, chaotic good, if you will.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I won't go so far as say chaotic neutral. Chaotic good, actually, yeah, that's some sort of good.
So you use whatever means chaotic means to advance the cause of good.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be Robin Hoodish.
Yeah, and I think that comes closest to most people, really. That's the one that rings true most honestly for me personally.
I was like I guess I was introduced to character flaws and champions because you can buy extra points for your superhero by taking disadvantages. They could be things like codes against killing, or allergic to common things. And I always thought that really added an extra dimension to the character. So a conflicted character, like you're saying, one who begrudgingly works for the company, but he knows that it's dishonest, but he needs a paycheck, or whatever.
Yeah, well, to get a little bit artistic with you, when it comes to a story, you got the plot and you've got the character arc. Now, a lot of people don't really define the character arc too closely when they're making a character, but I think it's really important, because that for you as a player, like an actor or anything else, is where you start to define in your own mind the space where your character's got to move around. Because, this is not my words, I'm quoting as best as I can here, but why do we care about stories? Because stories are how we reflect on ourselves. Why do we care about characters? Because the story is about a character changing in some way. They're at a different place by the end of the story than where they were at the beginning of the story. So really, when you weave a character flaw in there that's pivotal to who they are, the idea is they start with this flaw, they engage the plot line, and on purpose or not, the situations of the plot somehow promote the character to confront this flaw that they've got. And then Act 3 is where they finally find a way to actually confront it. And by the end, the climax, they've confronted it, they've overcome the flaw, and they become this new person, which they didn't mean to maybe set out to be, but that's what they needed to resolve. And by the time they've resolved it, there's nothing more to tell. Roll credits. And so I think designing a character who's either at odds with the world in some way or has a major flaw to overcome, that gives you a plot line as a player that you can almost be like your own private GM and interject that to a certain degree, or at least look for opportunity to bring that into the story. And I think a good GM will spot that a mile off and they'll embrace it and run with it.
Yeah. It's like, what's my motivation? Well, you can make up a motivation for your character, and then in every situation you can say, well, how does whatever I do advance myself towards my motivation, or my character towards his motivation?
Yeah, absolutely. And your character's motivation, I mean, that's obviously a great stereotype for actors, but it shouldn't be the same as the character's goals. You know what I mean? Let's take Decker, for example. His goal is to find, those 4 rogue clones. That's his goal. But that's not his motivation. His motivation is to make sense of who he is, because deep down, we know his flaw is that he hates what he does, and he doesn't believe in it. He goes around killing people, and it tortures him. That's his flaw, and it's a flaw because his job is being a Blade Runner. And where is he by the end of it? He's wondering whether or not he's an actual clone, and he's sided with the clones. He helps one of them escape. He almost doesn't. His life is saved by one of the very people that he was out to kill. That's what makes Blade Runner so amazing. It goes all the way from one end to all the way to the other by the end of the story, and we're along for the journey. And that then makes us reflect upon ourselves. That's why stories are so good, man.
Awesome. Yes, I agree. Good points. All good points. So tell me, how did you get involved, or how did you get started with 2D Storyteller?
Well, I originally I originally had delusions of being a big filmmaker. I really wanted to be. I'm a big John Carpenter fan, so I had these delusions that I could go out and just on my own be a one man director, blah 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 blah. But making films is so much harder than that. But I did all the training along that journey. I got a degree in visual effects and digital film production. I later taught in that for a while. And I got to a point in my life where I was like, you know what? I've learned all these skills and I've had to accept that there's just not a big enough film industry where I am, or there's not enough talent, or I can't find the right script. What can I do with all these skills that I've learned? So an old friend of mine was wanting to do some role playing again. So we did it. And then he showed me Roll20. And I thought, well, hang on. And then I realized role play had made this massive resurgence, particularly D&D and such like that. I just thought, is there anything I could do with this skill set? And I started by making a zombie apocalypse pack on Roll20. I didn't do amazingly, but it showed some interest and I was really proud of it. So, and I love that feeling. So I've just been chasing that feeling and progressing my skill set towards making things for role play games. Set up 2D Storyteller, and since then I've just been creating as much as I can and pumping it out and trying to create bigger and more interesting products that enhance games. That's what it's all about.
The first time I saw some of your stuff, I was pretty impressed. I mean, I think it was like a dwarven adventure or something. There was like a bridge over a chasm with a flowing waterfall. Yeah, man, and like the bridge can collapse, and the whole animated backdrop made the game that much more lively and what do I want to say, like immersive.
Yeah, I mean, this is 21st century. We've got a lot more tools than we used to have when I was starting out role playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started to think, how can that slot in? How can I make that work, with this new technology we've got and all the new skills I've got? So I went away and I started creating some composites. And I started off by making animated maps. Unfortunately, Roll20's support for animated maps is still in development, so it's not exactly where it needs to be. But I realized that you could create animated elements of that map. And that actually led me by accident almost into this idea of interactive battle maps, where you can have animated features on the board. And so it's like with Dwarven Mountain, it gives the GM animated items that they can put onto a static battle map. So they can actually create a moving animated battle map of their own, but also animations which are set to just play once rather than loop. And that basically means it's interactive. So like you say, with that bridge, you plonk it down and that is an animation in the middle, that bridge. But when you click a certain button, bang, the bridge collapses on rocks. So that means the GM at some point, whenever they feel it's appropriate to the game, can suddenly trigger an event and the map changes in some way. And I just thought that's a brilliant tool to give storytellers and GMs. And I went on to do the same thing for Hostile Organism. I do it a little bit in Starship Battles. Galaxy interface is a little bit more like animated features rather than interactive, but it's still got that element to it.
I really like the pirate ships and like the sea monsters, and that was clever. It's got like a sailor and a tentacle waving him around and stuff.
Yeah. Well, there's actually a rather cruel part in that where there's a dwarf being torn in half by two tentacles, but I don't think. No, I didn't put that in the advert just because I thought I wanted to keep it PG. It is in the pack though, so if there's a sick GM out there who wants that unpleasant image in their players' heads, by all means, feel free.
So tell us, what have you been up to this past year since we talked to you last time?
Well, you remember me talking about Patreon previously, I should imagine. Yes. I grow ever closer to that. I wish I'd had it out sooner, but I'm a big believer in that principle of how long will it be? When will it be finished? When it's done, and not a moment before.
It'll be ready when it's ready.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So I've been trying it because I love the idea of animated maps on a table where you can have miniatures in front of you. And so that's what I've been developing. I got a couple of Patreons launching this year, one for fantasy and one for sci-fi. And I'm also able to bring in that interactive element onto the table as well. So for those people who wanted to still keep that to it, that's going to be included too. So that's what I've been really working on. I've also got some sci-fi packs which I've created, like Starship Battles, which is a pack designed to give you, if any fans of X-Wing or, in Traveller, you want to do a big spaceship sci-fi battle with capital ships, frigates, starships, fighters, all that lot. And lots of funky effects like animated shields that you could put on your ships or damage that's happening, little explosions and smoke, all set in a beautiful sci-fi space scene, Starship Battles. And then Hostile Organism, which that like we were talking about the Dwarven pack with the interactive elements.
Right.
I wanted to push that a bit further. And I wanted, because also something I like the idea of is modular tiles, where you can basically construct your own interior of a place. So I created Hostile Organism with modular tiles in mind, and then interactive elements that you can put on the modular tiles. So what you end up with is a modular tile set that you can build an interior of a spaceship, and interactive elements where you can have alien monsters come out, or the computer screens are saying different readouts or alarms or doors that and they open, or having the ship fire out of the docking bay, all these lovely sci-fi effects that you might want to include in your game. So I basically took that interactive element and thrust it into that sci-fi RPG environment.
That's awesome. That's an excellent resource for sci-fi GMs, and it really
Hostile
helps.
Organism.
Yeah, it helps kind of visualize what's going on in the ship and ratchets up the tension.
Yeah, but I also wanted to make it exciting. Sci-fi, one of its big, more aesthetic features is this exciting, grand spectacle that we get to watch, and I just wanted to take advantage of that. And so I did. That's Hostile Organism, Starship Battles. That really does take advantage. Two completely different packs, but yeah, there's lots of different opportunities in Hostile Organism to terrify your players and get them to feel like they're actually on a spaceship. But also with Hostile Organism, I thought I wanted to create a rounded pack. So if I want, characters in there that are going to interact with X, Y, or Z, I can't really expect to just drag a random character in. So I actually put lots of character tokens in there that are interacting with stuff, the flamethrowers or they're working on a console. So it all fits neatly together. But also in my packs, I like to include atmospheric audio. So I'm just trying to give the GMs what they can to drag their players into the moment. So you get map tiles, you get animated tokens, you get animated interactive tokens, you get audio, you get some pre-made maps, you get lovely artwork. It's good stuff, all for a very reasonable price, I might add.
Yes. And what platforms do you have that available for currently?
At the moment, it's just on Roll20, and some people ask me about that a lot. And it's not because some people have got to think I've got a private contract with Roll20, but I don't. It's just that moving to other platforms can be a bit messy sometimes. It can be a bit tricky to work things out. I'm working at the moment to expand onto Foundry. How I'm going to do that, which avenue I'm going to take, I'm still working out, but that's coming soon. My work is expanding onto Foundry soon enough. And my Patreons that are coming up, that's going to be system agnostic. So I basically give you the files, and from there, it's up to you how and where you use them. Because some platforms will be able to use those animated maps. Some platforms might struggle with it. It all depends. But they're targeted at using it on a digital TV that you're sat around. So anything that you want to use beyond that. I mean, I try in the Patreon, I'll also be doing different versions of the maps. So some of them are a bit more tailored to be used on a VTT rather than just on the table. So I try and compress it a little bit more, but that always run the risk of data loss. So I try and hold back a little bit on how much I compress it, just enough to make it a little bit more manageable on a bandwidth.
How big are the files, or how big do these packs typically weigh in?
Well, what you mean for the Patreon?
Well, like if I was to download like the Starship pack, the Starship
Well, you
Battles.
can't download it quite yet, but when it does go out for Foundry and such like that, it's actually quite lightweight because I put a lot of work in on my end to optimize the files. I think something like the Starship Battles, when all's said and done, the pack comes out at about 70, 80 megabytes. And that's for everything, including audio and all that. But like I say, that's because I do a lot of compression and I do a lot of optimization on my end. I'm paranoid about optimization. It's because I used to work on Source Engine, and if you didn't do optimization on that, you are dead in the water. So it's kind of like a very OCD thing on me. By the time the GM gets it, I want to have solved as many problems as I can for him. That's the way I look at it.
What was the most difficult thing to overcome when building these when putting together these packs at first?
You know what?
What was harder than you
so
thought
many...
it was going to be?
The list of difficult things to overcome is pretty long. To be honest, everything's a bit of a challenge because for one, you've got to know how to build things in 3D. For two, you've got to know how to make that look good. All that's trial and error, time and skill, and just practice. Get it wrong 100 times so you can get it right once, you know. And then you've got perspective. That's a tricky one to work with because if you just do a purely top-down perspective, flat on, you're not going to get as much detail as you feel you should do from putting all that work in. So you have to make certain compromises with your camera angles just to get that little bit of extra detail. And actually, it's worth the effort because that bit of extra detail can make the difference between a room feeling like the location or just feeling like, you know, 4 walls with some props in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, that is the hardest thing, to get the look that you're aiming for. And that can only be done with the right amount of trial and error, getting it wrong, and then finally getting it right, and then getting it into a format that's stable enough to be used on a VTT, and then figuring out how to publicize it, ship it, make the trailer for it. But yeah, getting the look, that's always the hardest thing.
How long does do the typical renders take on your end?
Well, once again, that's how long is a piece of string. Animations obviously take longer to render because you're not rendering one frame of an image. You know, you're rendering sometimes 100, sometimes 50. So it depends what you're rendering also, because it's like when I was rendering the Kraken for my High Seas pack, there's lots of moving parts on that thing. The tentacles alone have loads of bones inside them that are flopping around. A nightmare for a nightmare for animating, but also a nightmare for rendering, because every frame it's got to render all that detail, all that ambient occlusion, all the displacement maps, etc. I think the longest render was for the Elven Forest pack, but that was because this comes back to the camera problem. Sometimes when you're setting up a camera, you're trying to get as much detail in for the shot as you can, but at the same time, the further your camera is away from what it is you're rendering, the more detail you lose. So the more you have to crank up the pixels, and the more you crank up the pixels, the longer you render. Now, for the interior of my Elven Palace, which was a big location, I've since learned better ways to do it, but I had the camera really far out, so the DPI was absolutely monstrous. And that took about 60, 70 hours just to render. That was not an animation. That was one frame. But like I say, you make these mistakes and you make them over and over again. And all you can do is learn from the mistakes, build a better workflow, and keep coming at it and keep fighting. What it's all about is keeping on fighting for the idea that you had in the first place. That's what it all really comes down to.
After a 60-hour render, I must be kicking the butt to be like, oh no, there's a mistake.
Dude, that did happen the first attempt. So you've got to have a lot of resilience. You got to have a lot of perseverance and be willing to go, you know what, this isn't right. I'm going to start again. But like I said, you develop your workflow. It's like that mistake. I've learned from that mistake. I will not make that mistake again. I know better ways of recreating the same thing. You can't learn that unless you do it wrong.
Right. I have a friend who does 3D printing, and he prints out, sometimes the 3D printers make mistakes. And if it's a filament thing, you could leave it on print and walk away and think it's doing okay, and then you come back to a big knotted up mess. And it's to the point where now they even have cameras built in on the 3D printer so that you can look in on it and make sure it's not turning into a big knotted mess.
Wow. So what if it is? They just click cancel and then
you just got to cancel and then try to figure out where it messed up at and continue printing from there.
You got to take it on the chin. I'm surprised there isn't a machine that allows you to melt that filament down again if you've made a mistake. Or maybe there is. I don't know.
I don't know if it's. It seems like
any inventors out
waste.
there?
Yeah, I don't know how to recycle that stuff. Yeah, let me know. I'm interested.
Yeah. We're looking to invest.
How do you recover from from mistakes in 3D printing. I mean,
I'll do
if you make a
recycling
mistake
filament.
in rendering, you just render again. I guess you could just print again, but when you're rendering, you're not using
Yeah,
up
but
raw
you can't.
materials.
Yeah, but you can't get that time back. And
Yeah,
all
yeah, and you
that.
can't get that time
It's like,
back.
I haven't got a render farm. If I'm rendering, then that's my machine occupied until the render's finished because it takes up all my processing power.
Right, right.
I can't be working in the background. You know what I mean? So it's like that 60-hour render. I set it off thinking, oh, you know what? I'll set it off before I go to sleep. I'll wake up. The render will be done. 2 days later, I'm like, dear God, when will this end?
I need my computer back. I have to do stuff.
and then you start questioning yourself: am I an idiot? Am I really trying to do this? Is this worth it? And in the end, you know what? Getting the idea that you set out to do, the feeling that you get once you've actually created the idea that you set out to do, it is worth it. And then for someone to actually get you back and then give you feedback and say, "Hey, I used it for this game where this, this tree guardian came out of the forest, and the fact that he could be animated at that time, it really made my players' head spin. They're coming back for the game. They love it. They're coming back every session." That's when I think, yes, you know what? That 60 hours, painful as it was worth it.
Yep, yep. So what makes you what aspect of making the 3D maps makes you most proud?
Well, like I said, it just being able to take an idea and actually turn it into something that exists and that you can show other people and they can see the idea. I mean, running games, role play games, it's that same urge. I'd have an idea of a story in my head or a character arc or something like that I wanted to get across. And I'd sit down with the players, they'd make the characters, and by some strange accident of alchemy, we go the way I'd kind of intended. Obviously, I planted that in my subconscious, so somewhere or another, I'd guided it that way. But all of a sudden, between these 4 people or 5 people, however, you've created this idea, and though you can't see it, it is tangible. It's there. You know what? It's the Blade Runner syndrome. You all come away from the gaming table, and yeah, we've created a false memory of something that never happened. But how false is it? Because it's there in our memory as though we saw it. We experienced something they experienced my imagination vicariously, and I experienced their imagination vicariously. Now, the 3D side of it, take that one step further. I could imagine it. I could think of that scene, a scenario. When I'm thinking of a map, I think of a situation that I'd like the GMs to be able to play with or to thrust the players into. And that situation has got a location. So I always think situation and location. That's always my starting point, and then I build from there. And the big boost from that is by the end of all that effort, it's there. They can see it and they can take it away. And despite what my motivation was to create it, hopefully they'll go away and do something with it that I never predicted, that I never thought about. And that's them doing the same thing over and over again. And bit by bit, the ripple moves across the water. And that's why creativity is so important, in my opinion. Because we keep inspiring each other in some way, shape, or form.
Can your animated map bundles be mixed and matched across? Like, can I use elements from the Dwarven Forge in the Elven pack or something?
Yeah. My Roll20 packs. I mean, if you really wanted to, you can mix some of the sci-fi stuff in there. Because they're all created by the same engine in roughly the same kind of way. They do cross over really, really well. My Patreon stuff is obviously mainly just they're not modular. They're designed to be a location on a table with an interactive element that you use miniatures on.
Right.
But my Roll20 stuff, that is mostly crossover. It's like my Galaxy interface pack that would work really well with the Starship Battles pack. In fact, it worked really well with it because you got the Galaxy interface where you got a kind of macro view of the galaxy, and then you could effectively, almost like on your next page, zoom in. Oh, that bit of the galaxy we were just looking at, there's this battle going on there, and here's the ships that's taking part, and so on and so on and so on. And then with the if you wanted to go one step further, zoom in, we got Hostile Organism, where okay, now you're actually on one of these ships, and here's the characters, and this, you know what I mean? So
right.
They can thread together quite seamlessly.
You might even be able to pull some of the space landscape from Galaxy interface, like the black hole, and use it on the
easily.
Starship
That'd be
Battle
perfect.
map.
That'd be perfect.
Don't get within too close of this thing, or it's going to suck you in.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And also, if you wanted to go another step further, then you could, maybe pull in me Elven Forest Pack or Dwarven Mountain Pack. And, it might be sci-fi, but there are still planets that are all about snow. There are still planets that have got forests.
Right.
There are still planets where there's an ocean. You know what I mean? And there's low-tech and high-tech. So, yeah, it can all be mixed and matched.
You need something that's like indoor? Okay, bring in a forest pack. And here's the Elven pack is perfect for that. Right. Just don't use any of the structures, Use the sci-fi structures.
Hey, you could use some of the fantasy stuff because, like with Traveller, there are low-tech planets.
That's true.
And even if they're high-tech, they might have a monument there from their past, cultures. They might even have magic if you wanted to go down that road.
Or it could just be their weird local architecture style because they live in the trees.
I mean, that's the beautiful thing about sci-fi. It lends itself to almost anything. It's a beautiful way of looking at stories.
Tell us about some of the other products in your product line.
Oh, sorry. Sometimes I get so caught up in what I'm doing. Sometimes I forget where I've been. So, you
have a broad, what I'm going to say, like offering not just sci-fi stuff, and not just the dwarves and elves, but a whole bunch of other stuff.
Well, sci-fi and fantasy are my main focuses. I've also got like I said, I started out with the zombie apocalypse pack, but the shall we say the number of people playing zombie apocalypse on Roll20 is not as big as it could be. But also, I've got a few smaller packs which are good for bolt-ons to the other packs. Like there's a couple of desert packs which are good for deserty kind of environments. One of them I made when the Dune roleplay game first came out, and that's just a few desert maps with it's called Desert Worm. So it's all around this big desert worm, and you can have it come in and out of the sand. You can have it come up and say if it's attacking people, but there's also a map where it's actually traveling across the sand and it's big enough for you to actually have an encounter on its back. So it's ideal for anyone who's got a kind of a Dune fixation.
That sounds awesome.
It was surprisingly fun to make that. Especially just trying to get the traveling element of it with a moving background. That's always a fun rendering escapade. And then we got Cursed 2, which is kind of like the cursed pyramid in the desert lands. Very stereotypical, but at the same time, it was nice to make something that wasn't just a dark forest or a wintry location for once.
Mm-hmm.
And Chase Scene, which is... Now, that is something which is quite dear to my heart, because I've always been in love with things like, Return of the Jedi, where they have that wonderful chase scene on the speeder bikes.
Right.
I mark my words, at some point I'm going to do something along those lines on one of my maps. But I've created a pack for the fantasy version of that, where it's basically fantasy warriors on horseback having I like the idea of GMs being able to give their players a rolling scene where they're all fighting on horseback and trying to take each other off it and stuff like that. And that's got the actual background moving as though you're moving at high speed, which at first feels a little disorientating, but once you get into the flow of it, your eyes get used to it. It pans out and it's all just fine.
Yeah, you could just leave it idling on the screen as you're talking, and you just get the feel. We're chasing.
Because the background's constantly moving, and the animated characters that I include in the pack are like, they're animated to be riding whatever creature they're on. It just feels like they're constantly moving forward. So it's got that real nice feel to it. It's just your eyes take a few seconds to get used to it, because obviously your eyes naturally, like when you're sat in a car, your eyes always want to try and focus on one thing as it goes past. But after you stop trying to do that and you just let the background whiz past you, like when you're on a motorway or something, then it becomes easy to look at.
Right. It's rather than looking at the details of the individual layers, you're seeing all the layers moving as a whole.
Because
overall
when you're moving fast past something, you can't focus on individual details. It's you got motion blur and stuff.
Right. So, what are your plans for the next year? You got any conventions or gaming groups or new productions going?
Like I say, my Patreons are coming up, and those are going to become my forefront projects. And you see, I'm toyed here. I'm toyed? No, I'm torn. Because I want this. Estoy. Is that Esperanto?
I got her.
I'm torn. You don't understand, Cyborg. I want to tell you all about them, but at the same time, I'm going to keep my secrets. So I don't know where Arnold came from. My apologies. Because of earlier when we. Anyway, right.
Mm-hmm.
So my Patreons are coming up, and I've got some big plans for that. It's basically my opportunity to. The issue I've got with making things on VTTs is I'm always at the mercy of bandwidth and what the VTT can handle in terms of what I want to put on the screen. Now, with my Patreons, I'm targeting that as digital gaming tables, so animated maps with interactive features for digital gaming tables for miniature use, people get to use their minis and all their painted stuff.
Yes, I've seen that
So,
not fad, but whatever that.
it is not a fad, my friend. It is the future. And I've been doing it with my nephew doing my tests. And I've got to say, it adds so much to your miniatures battles. Because you've got the audio, you've got the atmosphere of the location, and then you've got the actual physical things that are moving around. And that can be as simple as a few trees moving. It could be spaceships flying past. It could be so much. There's so much potential for what we can do with animated battle maps now. So my Patreons are a chance for me to really get out there and push the limits of what can be on a person's gaming table, because I'm not limited by a VTT because it's all there on the table. I'm not limited by bandwidth. So I can start really exploring some ideas that I've been wanting to do for ages. I've got my first fantasy Patreon coming up that should be launched in May, and my sci-fi Patreon for the similar kind of tabletop experience, but for sci-fi, is launching round about summertime, I'm aiming. The dates on that, I can't give a fixed at the moment, just simply because I'm trying to organize everything around it, as well as setting up the Patreon and the pages and the marketing for it, etc. And making trailers for it is taking up some time. But that is the dates. May and summer are when the big launch happens. So fantasy should be coming out in May, and then summer is my big sci-fi launch, which I remember talking to you about the sci-fi animated battle map so long ago. And just with everything that's gone on, this is finally what's given me a chance to get to it. This is the year where I launch them. And you know what? I'm so excited. I might just slip into Arnold again and tell you want to look up 2D Storyteller animated battle maps for your table. It'll make it brilliant. It'll make it awesome. Arnold gives us his guaranteed recommendation.
Awesome. I look forward to
those things. Gamer. Don't be a puny weak gamer. Get an animated battle map digital tabletop. Do it now. Do it now.
Awesome.
Sorry,
it's nice to have such a reputable spokesman.
Well, thank you, Arnold. I appreciate it. All right.
So, tell us, how can people find you and your stuff?
Well, it's surprisingly easy. I seem to be the only 2D storyteller company out there. So just look for 2D Storyteller, Google my name. My main hub at the moment is Facebook. I've got a Facebook page on there. Like that, follow that, and you'll be updated on everything that goes on. Also, 2D Storyteller on Twitter. I always put links out to new packs that come in, things that are going on. That will give you a good feed in. 2D Storyteller's also on DriveThruRPG. So check me out on there. Google 2D Storyteller and most of my stuff will come up. I'd look forward to seeing you. I hope you get on board, and I look forward to making some fantastic things to inspire GMs. That is my ultimate mission statement. Ooh, also, while I got chance, I'm sorry, I'm monopolizing a podcast.
Go.
But I've got a new pack coming out, which is kind of leaning into the Ravenloft thing a little bit. I know it's not Traveller. I apologize for being so crass to hijack you a little bit. But for those fans of Ravenloft, I've got something coming soon, which is in the same kind of structure as my interactive battle maps before, with the Dwarven Mountain, etc., except set in the grim, dark, gothic Ravenloft style world.
Awesome. And what about your Patreon? How do people find that?
That will be still under the name 2D Storyteller. So that when it goes live, I'll be shouting from the rooftops. So if you want to get on board my Patreon, then get on board my Facebook or my Twitter. Both will be shouting or my Instagram, which I'm not that active on yet because I'm a boomer. So I'm still learning these wonderful toys. But they will all be screaming from the rooftops when my Patreons go live. So like and follow on my Facebook, Twitter, 2D Storyteller on Instagram as well. And I
YouTube,
will be letting
all
you
those
know.
Places.
YouTube, yeah, all the major places. Google 2D Storyteller, and you should find me.
Fantastic. Well, Neil, we've come to the end of our interview.
Again, parting is such a sweet sorrow, Cyborg.
Yes.
Mr. Prime.
Well, folks, I'm your host, Frank Succardi, also known as Cyborg Prime, and I've been talking today with my friend Neil Thorpe of 2D Storyteller.
And Arnold, go and check out 2D Storyteller on Google 2D Storyteller now. Go do it now. Thank you, Arnold. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Prime, for having me back again.
You're very, very welcome. And Neil, thanks for participating in our 4th annual Traveller Mayday event. I hope you'll join us again next year.
Of course. Always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Fantastic. And thank you, dear listener, for joining us for the 4th annual Traveller Mayday event. That's all for now, travelers. Until next time, happy traveling.
This data crystal will self-destruct in 5 seconds.